Welcome back to the Chiefs Pit. We've got the Petty brothers here, Mark, Timmy, and Richie. We grew up in racing, and a lot of times big things happen and you didn't really realize what was going on. And you didn't really realize the significance of it. And our family won a lot of big races, was in a lot of big races and stuff. And so we just expected stuff. As we get older, we understand pretty neat deal that we was able to witness some of these things. So we're just going to do a little round table today of events and races that we were in attendance of, didn't necessarily working, but growing up, just being there, what was turned out to be a pretty big race. So Timmy, what was probably
You're starting this one
greatest race?
because that one that you
Okay,
talked about,
well,
the
I'll start.
Rebel.
I'll start.
Well, and we were fortunate. We seen a lot of great races.
Oh yeah,
A
And
lot
I'm
of
talking
great
about,
drivers.
and I'm talking about
The
great
one-
race car drivers racing.
the one
yeah.
that you was talking about is also one of my favorites
Okay.
because of the and you did
We'll,
explain.
we'll,
Go
we'll,
ahead.
we'll go into it. The greatest race that I've witnessed that I didn't realize at the time that turned out to be a pretty good race. You can go watch it now on the YouTube or whatever. The 1979 Rebel 400 at Darlington. It come down to the last 10 laps. Darrell Waltrip and Richard Petty just going at it. I mean, you talk about two of the finest drivers at the time. And Richard would go in and pass Darrell. He going into one. Darrell would let him go, let him slide up, go back underneath. They would pass each other 2 to 3 times a lap. And this went on for the last 10 laps.
The Darrell Waltrip machine in hot pursuit, glued right on that back bumper. He's painted a bullseye there. Waltrip tries to go high over in turn 4. Richard Petty holding Waltrip off, coming down the front chute. When he comes by, it'll be 3 laps to go. Darrell Waltrip down on the inside. They're side by side. They'll go into turn 1 side by side, and Darrell Waltrip is going to take the lead in turn 1. Slam bang action over in that turn number 1. Waltrip took the lead. Here comes Petty right back. Petty down on the inside, dives off that 25-degree banking of turn 2. He pulls up along the quarter panel, now up alongside the door. They're headed into turn 3. Richard Petty fronts Waltrip. Now Waltrip comes back down low on the inside as they dive into turn 4. Darrell Waltrip takes Richard Petty back coming out of turn 4. Darrell Waltrip, your leader. Richard Petty right up side by side. They make contact coming down the front chute. Donnie Allison makes it 3 abreast going into turn 1.
Bad thing for us, Darrell won. Good for Darrell, bad for the Petties. But it was probably the best racing, this raw, hard racing I ever seen in my life.
Who else was racing with him before that? Was it Cale?
It might have
I
been.
think Kel was in on it, but he blowed up. He was
Well,
in MC's car.
And if you remember, that was the cast iron cylinder head days, and both of them was spitting water out where the heads were starting to crack when they poured them so thin, and you could see them coming off 4. And you just knew either of them two was going to blow up because Cale had already blown
Well,
up.
that was back in the day. They run bias-ply tires, so they could run in there and they could sit on that right rear, and man, they would smoke them things up. But Darlington's a weird racetrack anyway. I never really understood how to get around it.
Well, and you started out by saying, you didn't realize how important that race was till later in life. But you're talking 1979. Look at what are pure race car drivers in that race. You had, Darrell Waltrip, Richard Petty was still running, Cale Yarborough, Dale Earnhardt,
Eddie Parsons,
Bobby Allison.
Yes,
Bobby Allison, Donnie Allison.
The list
And
goes
then,
on.
And then you had your rookie
Buddy
crowd.
And just the fact that we were able to watch them race at tracks like Darlington and Bristol and Wilkesboro and Martinsville, we didn't realize till older in life how that was the best racing you'll ever see in your life.
But think about your rookie crowd in that race. You had Dale Earnhardt, Joe Milliken, Terry Labonte, Harry Gant.
And Kyle Petty.
Kyle Petty was in there
Yeah,
too.
that was fine. I mean,
Some of the finest race car drivers of the future were going up against the finest race car drivers of the time.
So,
yeah.
since you're on the verge of running Atlanta right now, before they did the reconfiguration of Atlanta Motor Speedway, you could be on in the pits, and watch them go down the backstretch.
Yeah.
And some of the best racing I remember was in the pits at Atlanta before they reconfigured it.
Yeah, because you was hired in the campers.
And you could see them go down the backstretch.
Yep.
And you talking about Terry Labonte and all these guys that were sort of young then, and they were dicing it up with the old guard, and that's when I kind of come along and was going every week. But those were some really good racing at Atlanta.
Well, and it continued on. I mean, even some of them races like in the '90s with Dale Earnhardt. I mean, Dale Earnhardt got around Atlanta as good as anybody.
Oh yeah.
But them races he had with Gordon and Bobby Labonte, and then even. But that reminded me of that old day racing you're talking about back in
And then
'79.
Harvick come along and
but that old Atlanta track and the way they had to drive, it reminded me of those
I know
young memories.
everybody knows the '76 Daytona and Pearson and Richard battling it out to the end. That was a good race, and that was one of them races you didn't understand how significant it was to the history of racing. We were there. We experienced it, and our dad, he probably, he coming home, he probably didn't speak for 100 miles. He was so.
Well, and going back talking about watching these races, we watched these races from the top of a van,
Or a camper.
in the infield, or a camper, that Travco camper on top of a van. And I mean, I know there's a many of people that did, but you talk about a memory, and we discussed this a little bit the other day, but that cube van.
yeah.
Mom was standing on top of it in the 1979 Daytona 500, and when Kel and Donnie wrecked on the backstretch, that she jumped up and down. I thought the roof was going to come in on top
I
of that.
thought she was going to fall off.
And I want to say when Richard won the race, she jumped off that thing from the top and landed flat-footed.
She took
And
off.
I mean,
Looking for
everybody
Daddy.
was just you looking for Daddy because, man, what a great day. But
Probably.
Now, the deal would go back to '79, my memory of that. She's up there jumping up and down, and I'm thinking, what's going on? What's going on? And the next thing I heard her saying, they're wrecking. And then I'm looking around, I'm thinking, hey, Richard's third. We got a chance here.
Yeah.
and I mean,
Yeah. Capitalized on it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Man.
you was telling the one you thought the big one that you were involved with was the '81.
Well, yeah. So Bobby Allison had that fastback Pontiac.
That Le Mans.
Was it Le Mans?
Yeah.
And man, they were so fast that
Winning
week.
everything all week.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and he, Bobby, he
Had 'em
had
covered.
that Daytona trick too.
Oh, yeah, had them covered.
And so for some reason I had to go. We had Kyle was running the 42, and I don't know if we blew up or whatever happened, but we were over there getting ready to load up, so I had to go back to the garage area. And somebody come running back and said, "Hey, Richard's getting ready to win this race." And I looked up on the board, and sure enough, 43 is leading. I'm like, "Well, there ain't no way," because Bobby had done checked out.
for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I was like, well, shoot. So I started walking back over just to see, and sure enough, he won the 81 500 as well. So
Now, which race was it? It was a Firecracker 400. David Pearson wins it. Richard was second, but it was battling around. It might have been 74.
Oh, was that when Pearson let off on the last lap?
Yeah.
And the
Right
King
there.
about run over
Took
and got
the-
mad because he
took the white.
But Pearson just did it to get behind him.
Because
but-
Richard was
because of the slingshot. deal.
Richard was
Yeah.
in good shape, and he's sitting there thinking, I'm going to get him on the backstretch. Well, they
Yeah,
take
what
the
year
white.
was that?
I think it was 74, maybe. And then, so Pearson
Snookered him.
took the white flag, and then he just hit the brakes, and Richard was all over him. And then he had to pass him and go on. And, I mean, he got, good God, a half a straightaway. Not that much. But he got several car lengths ahead of him. It looked like he was going to get it. But them old big boats, man, they would draft. Now, they'd get a little hint of air, and they'd go. Pearson come down the backstretch. He sucked in on him.
Silver foxed him.
Oh, yeah, and he went around him. And Richard, bless his heart, he was madder than Hades.
Well, and I'll say, I don't know if this is, but you talk about these drivers like David Pearson, Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, and Richard and Cale Yarborough racing them. When I was a kid, I didn't like them guys.
Right.
If they beat Richard Petty, I don't like them people. But as I got older, I was able to look back and appreciate, again, we didn't realize the talent of drivers we were watching race. And
just the respect for those
yeah,
guys.
but like I said, that day Darrell Waltrip beat Richard Petty or whatever more than one day, but you was mad at them people. You do.
I know y'all probably don't. Well, you do remember, but we'd go to Rockingham, and they put on some pretty good races there too.
You better believe it.
And I mean, it was close quarter, big cars, just everything you can imagine. But my gosh, that was.
I remember that race at Rockingham when Bobby Allison was in the 2 car, wasn't the 2 the Can-Am car, whatever number it was, and he wrecked, and the thing burst on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Cam too.
Cam 2 car,
Yeah.
yeah.
Somehow or another we was at Rockingham one day, and I guess they were running really good, and I don't know if the King wrecked out or whatever, but I remember Daddy coming back, and you know how full the paddock got, and they were taking. He sent somebody back after a jack so we could jack up cars
Move
so he
them
could get
out.
out and go
Yep,
through the
I
tunnel.
remember
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, see that you talk about that paddock at Rockingham. That was cool because it was right there coming off 4, right?
Yeah.
And man, you was
Right there
almost
on
on
it.
the racetrack. You felt like, and
And another key to what you said a while ago to back up what it wasn't like you when that race was over with and festivities and whatever, whatever was going on. You didn't go to the airplane. You went and got in a van or a station wagon and you drove your butt home.
well, yeah, and
Wherever you was at.
And us as kids, when Daddy got done, he come out and was ready to go home. If you wasn't around the van,
You was in trouble,
oh, you got your tail whooped, and then you got in the van and rode home with a
He
tail
was ready to
whooping.
go.
and you didn't talk.
But you know,
No,
all right, here's a great racing memory that for us as kids was when the summertime and the spring and the fall when we would go to the races. Mother, Aunt Linda, and all these people that would help. They would take food and feed the pit crews.
oh,
Oh,
man,
my goodness, we had some
you
food.
think about Rockingham, because not they was cooking, the Dotsons was cooking, everybody, and it was all. Oh, you shoot.
Good homemade
Speaking of
fried chicken.
Martinsville,
Hey,
the
you
Wood
take-
Brothers would
yeah.
come.
And move on up into the future when Franklin Lambert would take them shoulders and stuff.
But you remember Mama?
Call off that menu.
But y'all say you remember Mama like before Darlington for the Southern 500 because Southern 500 used to be run on a Monday because of the South Carolina laws.
On Labor Day.
So she'd work all day Sunday frying chicken, cooking biscuits, cooking country ham and sausage, and we'd have donuts and stuff. It was just a dang eating fest for
Picnic.
us. Yeah.
All,
And then,
all day.
so the crew would get the car ready, and they'd come in there after they put the car on the line. They'd come in there and eat, and we'd have to get out of the way so they could eat. But then
Well,
we'd go
these
back to eat.
days, it turned into those ladies cooking lunches
Yeah.
and doing that. That turned into truck drivers cooking, and then I guess they got
Started
catering
catering them.
people to come in, and there's full meals like that in the garage. But these were the wives of the drivers and the
Doing the work,
mechanics,
yep.
and that
Well, they
was
said
what
that
made it a
grandma-
family atmosphere.
They said back in the 50s, and that grandmother was one of the few people because they took the family that would cook lunches, and people would come to Miss Petty's
Eat the
trunk
chicken.
and eat her chicken. You know what I mean? So, and Mother and Aunt Linda, they carried it on as they went on.
And Dave Marcus, some of the people that used to come with him, they'd bring him pickles and that string
Oh,
cheese.
yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. So
But I think we remember the Rockingham and Martinsville meals because so many local people would go. Friends that Linda and Richard went to church with, and all, and they'd cook too.
yep.
And
Yeah.
Martha Jane's persimmon pudding.
yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
You just named these people they were cooking, and it was
Pretty
it
big
was,
events.
It was
It
great
was.
cooks. Yeah.
So, like when we go up north to Pocono, Michigan, and Dover and whatever, but Mom and them, when we went in the summer, when the summer came, we'd go with them and drive there. But that we didn't back then in the South. You didn't have a lot of delicatessens,
Oh yeah, I know where you're going with this.
and so that was our introduction to like the salami and all the lunch meat. And Mama would get all and make them big old hoagie sandwiches,
Yep.
submarines, whatever you want to call them. But my God, remember we did that in the trunk. There'd be a sandwich menu,
oh, yeah.
sliced tomatoes.
That was at
onions.
Pocono because they had them fresh bakeries and stuff
Right.
to get the good bread.
And Mom would go and get all that stuff. And
Oh yeah, no, they nothing no better. And to this day, the deli sandwiches up north
There's
are
a
better
picture.
than they are down here.
absolutely.
There's a picture somewhere. I don't know if I can find it, but it's got. They showed them in the middle of Pocono. They're sitting on the inner guardrail, and it's got Barry Dotson and Wade Thornburg and Daddy, and they're all sitting there eating their sandwiches.
And that's
Yeah.
where that stuff come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we'd go get it, and we were able to do. I think we got off topic here,
Yeah.
but it don't matter.
It's still racing memories, dude.
Amen.
What few times that Daddy would deviate off of going straight from here at the level cross facility to whatever race we was going to. How many times do we really go somewhere like Hershey World, Gettysburg, or something like that?
Take a little
And
detour.
every time there was a natural.
Oh yeah.
Oh, was it Hershey
Storms.
Park that time the tornado
That
came
got a
through?
tornado come
Yeah.
through. Where else was we? And there was something else that went on that
yes.
that we went somewhere and like he kind of just finally gave up on trying to go like the other than racing.
Well, if you like the content, let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe. And if you want to hear some more racing stories, or if you got some special guests you want us to reach out to, let us know in the comments.